Hey everyone, Joe Waxman here. And in this video, I want to look at the chart of Lenny Bruce, comedian, controversial comedian, but a classic. Guys, don't forget to hit the like button, please, and subscribe if you have not already. Thank you. Now, I noticed a lot of people don't hit the like button. It really costs you nothing, and it helps me out a lot. So anyway, if you can, please do. All right, Lenny Bruce. Leonard Alfred Schneider, professionally known as Lenny Bruce. He was a American stand-up comedian, social critic, and satirist. He was renowned for his open, freewheeling, and critical style of comedy, which contained satire, politics, religion, sex, and vulgarity. His 1964 conviction in an obscenity trial was followed by a posthumous pardon in 2003. Paved the way for counterculture-era comedians. His trial for obscenity was a landmark for freedom of speech in the United States. 2017 Rolling Stone magazine ranked him third behind Richard Pryor and George Carlin on this list of 50 best stand-up comics of all time, which is funny in itself, which is ironic, because Richard Pryor and George Carlin, although very interesting people, weren't laugh out loud funny. And neither was, Lenny Bruce was, at least for me, I listen to them and I get a chuckle and I can see they're very fascinating, very interesting, very groundbreaking, all of them. And, wonderful respect, but I don't know. None of them am I laughing hysterically with. So here you go. Bruce was Jewish, and I love how they put that the first thing, because it's like this thing, whenever somebody's Jewish, you have to say they're the Jewish person, and if they're not Jewish, you just say their name. It's like everyone has to know that they're Jewish, because we have to know, a lot of people want to judge you based on if you're Jewish or not. Like, it's this fascination with cherry picking out the Jews, and that's why they call it the Jewish media. They ignore everyone who's not Jewish and only focus, look at all these Jews in the media or Hollywood. Let's only look at the Jews, right? So he's Jewish. We have to know that. That's first. And if you look at other people who are not Jewish, it'll just be like, and they're religious somewhere in the middle here. It'll be their religion was Catholicism or something like that, because people don't really, it's like, oh, they're Jewish. That informs me. That's a very important thing I need to know up front, because I need to know how to judge him, right? Based on whether he's Jewish or not. Now I'm going to judge him in a certain way because he's Jewish. Thank you for your bigotry. Okay. He grew up in Belmore and attended Wellington, blah, blah, blah. His parents divorced when he was 10. He lived with various relatives over the next decades. His British-born father was a shoe clerk, and they saw each other very infrequently. His mother was a stage performer and a dancer, an enormous influence on Bruce's career. After working on a farm, he joined the Navy. After comedic performance for a shipmate, which he was dressed in drag, his commanding officers became upset. He defiantly convinced the ship's medical officer he was experiencing homosexual urges, leading to a dishonorable discharge in July 1945. However, he didn't break any regulations, so he successfully applied to change his discharge to under honorable conditions by reasons of unsuitability for naval service. If in today's Army, Navy, whatever, if he was gay, he'd probably get a recommendation for promotion or something like that. In any case, 1959 rule. Okay, I'm just trying to find relevant stuff. He settled in New York, hoping to establish himself as a comedian. However, he found it difficult to differentiate himself. So he's very controversial, and he did a lot of different material, including racial stuff, obscenity, criticisms of organized religion, social critiques, and all that. All right. Early comedic career, including writing the screenplays, blah, blah. Okay, so, he had difficult time gaining traction in his career. He tried different things, and he was, doing okay, I guess, playing small gigs. Not really super successful early on. He was branded a sick comic because in those days it was very puritanical, right? It was very uptight, and you couldn't do that kind of humor easily. He was blacklisted from television, um, thanks to sympathetic fans like Hefner and Steve Allen. It was with great concessions to broadcast standards and practices. Jokes that might offend, like a routine on airplane glue sniffing teenagers, was done live for the Steve Allen Show in 1959. And this stuff would be considered tame by today's standards. Right? Back then, it was very controversial. He made unscripted comment on the recent marriage of Elizabeth Taylor to Eddie Fisher, a Jew. Will Elizabeth Taylor become bar mitzvahed? I think it would be bat mitzvahed, just to be grammatically correct in the Jewish terminology for female, but funny anyway. That's at age 16, there's like a ceremony becoming an adult for Jews. I went to many a bar mitzvah, bat mitzvah growing up in the Philly suburbs where there's a lot of Jews. I never had one because my family wasn't religious, and we just don't go by tradition. Like we use our brains, we think about stuff, and we just don't want, at least I don't want other people telling me what's real. I want to figure it out for myself. So, that's the way I go about it. He married a stripper, which is very fitting for somebody like Lenny Bruce. And he was determined she would end her work as a stripper. And that's important also, because there was a lot of conflict in his life, and I'll show you in his astrology chart how conflicted he was. And I think he was quite reserved initially about his comedy and like the things he would say. And then eventually he really just kind of like blew the lid off the whole thing and just became fully, Lenny Bruce, fully offensive, controversial, type stuff. And that's where he gained a name and success, doing that dark, dirty, controversial humor that was potentially offensive, but if you took it for what it really was, it wasn't. It's like, you got to bring humor to life, and nothing's really taboo if it's done right, racial stuff, and it wasn't offensive. Like that's the spirit wasn't offensive, even if it was offensive on the surface. His race stuff, all that, all the different things that he did, the spirit of it was not offensive. Right, versus somebody who's actually trying to hurt people, right? Like Kanye West was actually trying to hurt people, and that's offensive because he meant harm. And Lenny Bruce did not mean harm. He meant the opposite of harm. And he was big into drugs. Like that became, I think that's probably what helped blow the lid off his routine, just make it wide open for him. Heroin, methamphetamines, dilaudid daily. But he was still trying to get his girlfriend. I don't know if they married. Did they marry? They had a daughter. They fought a lot. Usually the result of serious drug use. They broke up and reunited over and over again. Legal troubles. He had a lot of legal troubles because, he would say stuff and he would get arrested just for like saying the wrong words, which I don't agree with. I think people can if a club owner doesn't like that material, just don't have them there, right? That's the kind of thing that I support. He was arrested for obscenity. He used the word cocksucker. That's quotes. Don't want to get booted off this platform. To is a preposition, come is a verb. That's that the sexual context of come was so common that it bore no weight, and that if someone hearing it became upset, you probably can't come. So that's the sort of thing that got him in trouble. Schmuck got him in trouble, which is an insulting Yiddish word. Schmuck is a very funny word. I mean, if you call someone schmuck, it's almost like, good for left factor value. Considered a term for penis. But it is offensive. I mean, I guess it depends on the context in which you say it. Among his supporters when he got into trouble were Woody Allen, Bob Dylan, Jules Feiffer, I don't know, Allen Ginsberg, Norman Mailer, William Starr, I don't know, James Baldwin. Yeah. So other Hollywood famous performers were supportive of his work. He appeared on network television only 6 times because he was so controversial and dirty. Known for relating details of his encounter with police directly in comedy routine, often included rants about his court battles and obscenity charges, tirades against fascism, and complaints that he was being denied for his right to freedom of speech. He was banned outright from several U.S. cities, so quite the rebel, quite rebellious, quite outspoken. Yeah. And not afraid to offend people, even though I don't think he was mean-spirited. He was not, he made fun of Jews, and he was a Jew. He made fun of other races. He did all kinds of stuff like that. But it was all in good fun. It was all in the spirit of freedom and humor, comedy. He performed with Frank Zappa and the Mother Inventions. Zappa asked Bruce to sign his draft card, but the suspicious Bruce refused. Interesting. He wrote a book, How to Talk Dirty and Influence People. I guess that's a play on Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. So I skipped over the huge court case. Well, I mentioned it, but in any case, that was a big deal. Bruce was found dead in the bathroom in his Hollywood Hills home. Found him naked on the floor. Acute morphine poisoning caused by an overdose. So that's it, basically. And I mean, I skipped over a lot of it, but he had moderate success during his life, but I think even after he gained even more success afterwards. And we'll look at that too. Okay. Now, Lenny Bruce is a great example of somebody who has a lot of core dignity planets, but who's skilled and talented nonetheless, not too dissimilar from Eminem, who is not a comic, but a rapper. Also very skilled, also very poorly dignified planets. And if you listen to Eminem, his lyrics are pretty foul and gross and disgusting and definitely lacking dignity. So interesting. So he's got a Libra sun conjunct the MC in the 9th whole sign house. 11th whole sign house. Okay, so Libra sun is debilitated. And Libra suns, like I said before, go one of two ways. Either they're totally like placid, soft people pleasers, yes men and women who just, go around conforming to everything and just, they're just like silly putty. They just they don't really have their own personality. They're just too conformist. Or they go the opposite way and they're just real obnoxious and offensive and crude and rude and Lenny Bruce like, Eminem like, right? So they can go either way with that. He's Sun conjunct Mercury, so he's going to be very intellectual. Mercury's okay in fellow air sign Libra because Mercury rules Gemini, so it's trine. It's domicile, one of its domiciles, so that's okay. Mercury in Libra is quite intellectual. But Sun does gain directional strength conjunct the MC. It's very strong for at least definitely aspirations to the highest, fame, fortune, public recognition, success, career. They want to be at the top because Sun is the king, it's the pride, it's ego. So they feel like they belong at the top, wherever the top is, whatever field they go into, they want to go to the top. And so that's very prominent. And you see this a lot with famous people, very strong 10th house, not every time, but a lot of times, right? Yeah, Sun's ruling the 8th whole sign house. Well, actually, no, it's the 9th whole sign house, if technically, but it's the eighth quadrant. And the reason I know it's the 8th, it's pulling in the 8th, because his father was missing, right? And so that shows 8th house relating to father, whether it's Sun in the 8th house, Leo 8th house, it shows the issues with the father and in and out. Father's in and out of life, often disappearing for a large amount of times. Not necessarily completely gone, but maybe they die young, or maybe they just completely abandoned. But a lot of times depends on, how, different factors and planets and aspects and signs, whatnot. Father's in and out of a person's life, right? And so that's how I know it's 8th house. 8th house is also going to bring in a lot of deep, heavy material, sex, death, right? Potentially other things, but not for him. I mean, obviously, it's not like occultism or astrology or anything like that, but sex and like that. So I think sex was. I don't know if he talked about. See, I'm not like a expert on Lenny Bruce. I don't know if he talked about death or anything like that. Deep, dark, dirty kind of the dirty, yeah, but not like the death kind of thing. I don't know if he did, but he was probably pretty comfortable with that subject too. But definitely the sexuality. Conjunct the MC shows that it's going to be a big part of his career, big part of his public routine. It's going to come out into the public. He's going to make it he's going to expose it, right? The 8th house is very comfortable with talking about sex, exposing, that sort of thing. The 8th house. I mean, he's not talking about like oil or taxes or anything like that. So, I'm just talking about the relevant side of the 8th house. Obviously, there can be other associations. Psychology, perhaps, is part of his, his ability to understand people psychologically, because that would also be an 8th house theme. And you could say that there was 9th house elements as well, talking about religion, philosophy, that sort of thing. So it's probably bring in some 9th house elements as well. Mercury is ruling the 7th and the 9th. So also Mercury. So religion would be there. But also his relationships are becoming also very public, prominent. He probably talks about them a lot. And that's also that somebody who also has a public image, strong public image. So a stripper obviously does, strips in public, she performs in public. So that kind of thing does fit there. But there is this opposition to Chiron. So Chiron is the wounded, the outcast, the lower class, the no class, the underclass, the homeless, the prostitutes, all that sort of underbelly, the dark underbelly, the rejected, anything that society would tend to reject and ignore and not want to expose, that's very chironic, right? So there is this tying into his relationships, there's this chiron, and the stripper definitely fits that, or like, he could be, and then because it's also ninth house, so his belief system, he's tying into that to his expression, to his act, to his routine. Sun is going to be what he shines on the stage as. So that's, he's going to talk about like all the underclass, because he's pulling in the chiron, right? So it's not just his girlfriend's a stripper. He's going to be talking about all the rejected, hidden underclass, underbelly of society, all the dark material that nobody wants to talk about, the taboo stuff, the dirty stuff, the homeless, the poor, the racial stuff, the sex, the, all that, all the dirty, dark, dirty underwear. It's the underwear of society. And there's an opposition there, right? And, so there's some conflict. It's not like he's just for it. It's not like he's for the drug addicts, the poor, the poverty, the prostitution, all that. There's a tension there, but at least it's part of his awareness, part of his act, right? He's not like, pro homeless, pro poverty, pro drug addiction, pro prostitution, but it is part of his routine. He's pulling that in, and part of his belief system as well, his philosophy, his religion. And speaking of religion, Moon in Virgo, that's very much in the ninth. In fact, it's the 10th whole sign house, and his mother is a performer. But here it's the ninth, and Moon in Virgo, so ninth, primarily ninth, but I would say pulling in an element of the 10th. But his mother was a performer and a dancer, and so that there is that element, and she was much closer, more influential to him. But there's this puritanical element. I mean, Moon in Virgo, it doesn't really get much more puritanical than that. I have Moon in Virgo, and it's extremely critical for one. So he does get a lot of material from that, right? The social criticisms, the criticisms of religion, ninth house, right? Philosophical criticisms. All the criticisms are coming from a Virgo moon, because Virgo moon is endlessly critical. And it needs to be, because the moon is our personal satisfaction. So he finds satisfaction in criticizing and being critical and being analytical, very sharp-minded, right? Very observational, very detail-oriented. Virgo moon's going to notice everything because its own satisfaction depends on it. It has to. It has to be very analytical, organizational, critical. That's how it becomes nourished. We need our emotional nourishment. Otherwise, we have to have it. We're not happy otherwise. Our moon is our happiness, it's our internal satisfaction. It's very important, the moon, right? So his philosophy is all about, being, critical, being analytical, and criticizing all the faults within society. It's taking a very negative turn, not very negative, just it's that he expresses himself in an undignified way, right? But this Virgo moon also has standards, and so he's not just content to have a prostitute girlfriend. He wants to take her out of it. He's not content to be a drug addict. I'm sure that wasn't a happy thing, that he's like, oh yes, that's my life's goal, to be a drug addict. No, that wasn't. And it was a source of distress for him. I know that because it's a very strong square to Venus here. He loves drugs. That's the Venus in Sagittarius. Venus in Sagittarius wants to party, wants to be free, wants to celebrate, especially in the 12th house here. I mean, it's pretty much 12 because it's so far from the ascendant. It's very much pulling in the 12th house. Good for artistic creativity. Not so great for those, the drugs and possibly alcohol. I didn't read anything about alcohol, but he's probably very much into alcohol and probably smoked. I mean, his habits are that indulgent, side of things, and that is very much a 12th house thing, right? But it's square his moon, and so it didn't give him any satisfaction. He's, he's like a reluctant drug addict, and he's a reluctant, he probably had a lot of reservations about being so controversial, being so, foul-mouthed, dirty. But then he got over it, and he's just like, not super happy about it, but that's how he found success, right? His Venus is ruling his MC, so his career obviously depends on him being Venus in Sagittarius 12th house, which is very open, very free, very liberal with his habits. Venus is what we enjoy. It's our indulgence. It's also our relationships, our women, for men especially. So it's all the things that he loves doing, that his body, naturally gravitates towards for satisfaction, for indulgence. Not his emotional satisfaction, but his physical, sensorial satisfaction. So he's at odds. He's not a happy camper, actually, right? The moon does. Moon is ruling. It's mostly 7th house. I think there's 2 7th house lords. This happens. I mean, just through experience, I can tell you, like, it would not be 8th because his mother was playing a pivotal role in his life, and the 8th lord would be too heavy and would be missing. Mother would be missing. There would be a lot of conflict and difficulty with the mother. So it's much more 7th, the moon, pulling in 7th. Also, Mercury is also 7th. So moon and Mercury both 7th. And it can be more than one, right? More than one is pulling in that kind of energy. So he does have, so like the partnership, part of him is like very puritanical about his girlfriend, his relationships, and how he relates to the public. Because that's Virgo moon, and the 9th house is quite it's not necessarily religious, but it does believe in a certain standard of quality and cleanliness and purity, right? So he wants his girlfriend to get clean. And at the same time, there's this Neptune in Leo, which is still, even though it's out of sign, it's still conjuncting the moon. And so, like, okay, that makes sense for his mother, performer. Neptune is the creative arts, the glamour, the show business, the fantasy and illusion and delusion, right? And so that is very much a part of his own internal emotional satisfaction as well, the Neptunian quality, which he's, especially in Leo, like that, he very much wants to be on stage, wants to perform, wants that glamour, that glitz, the facade, right? The acting quality that comes with being a comedian, the performance, right? And also drugs and alcohol, right? Neptune, you can't avoid that. So there, and that's a funny combination. It's not exactly harmonious, but he's trying. I mean, I can tell you, like, he's not a happy camper because he's not getting what he wants. He can't get what he wants because it's too conflicted. He wants to perform and he wants to do drugs, but at the same time, it's making him miserable, unfortunately. And he's drawn to this woman who's a stripper, who stays a stripper, and he doesn't like it, but he can't get out of it. So that's got to be very painful for him, because Virgo, I can tell you, Virgo moon it's very really tries hard to achieve a certain standard, and it's very dissatisfied when it cannot achieve that standard, or when people around it do not meet that standard. It's like, you need to do better, try harder, stop being this way, come on, or just like, let's split ways and I don't want to associate with you. But it's like very difficult when those people are your family, or you're in love with them and you can't change them because they're their own person. It's very difficult. Yeah. Ascendant Lord Jupiter is in Capricorn. Jupiter is debilitated in Capricorn. Jupiter's faith, optimism, religion, philosophy. Jupiter in Capricorn is it's a very difficult time with God. They can be very negative on the inside. And really just, their faith turns to physicality. They, they want to succeed. They want money. They want success. And that's what they believe in. And they become they can become very cold inside, internally cold. Because they don't have that faith of the heart. They can become depressed easily and negative. Jupiter, it's in the first, second house. I mean, it's in the first quadrant, second whole sign house. He did speak for living, so that is influence there. But he didn't have tons of money. At one point, he even put on a charity con, where he stole some priest clothing and pretended to made a charity for some cause. I can't remember what it was. And actually, I think he did donate a small portion of the money that he made. Like, he got like $8,000 in funds, donated like, I don't know, 1,500 to the charity and kept the rest. But the purpose was to make enough money so that his girlfriend, the stripper, wouldn't have to strip anymore. So it's like noble cause, but like deceitful at the same time. And this is interesting, right? The reason I bring that up is because it's not fully in the second house either. Jupiter in Capricorn is not in good dignity, but Jupiter in the second, I think, would still produce enough money. So I think it's a first, second, and first house Jupiter also does make sense because Jupiter gains directional strength in the first house, accidental dignity. It's called. It makes a teacher, and not necessarily a great teacher, but a teacher nonetheless. Somebody who can philosophize and pontificate and preach to the audience, kind of like a Malcolm X had Jupiter and Capricorn in the first, right? And it took time for him to develop that, Malcolm X to evolve that Jupiter into something a bit more dignified, but he did throughout his life, and it took some. That's the nature of planets, is that we evolve them, right? And so there's this first, second house Jupiter, and that is to his credit, that it gives him this strong Jupiterian quality, the ability to talk to people and be a Jupiter, a kind of teacher, a kind of inspiration, even if it was negative. Jupiter has some aspects to it. First of all, it has quite a nice sextile to Saturn, so making it much more. And Saturn is bonifying this Jupiter, because Saturn rules Capricorn. So it's giving this Jupiter a lot more strength, a lot more dignity than it would have had otherwise. So there's some benefit to this Saturn. Saturn in good dignity, Jupiter is also going to be a bit more philosophical in the scientific way, because Saturn often brings a scientific quality, right? So now you're talking about like scientific philosophy, like psychology, or other more materialistic academic philosophers like that, as opposed to spiritual philosophers, which is in a different category. By the way, Saturn in the 11th, not in good dignity, which is it's Scorpio. Yeah, Saturn, I mean, it's not great dignity, but this is, in the 11th house, it's going to limit career success and delay it. And they did do that. But Jupiter also is opposite Pluto. He's got a lot of aspects, right? A lot of tight aspects. So that makes him interesting. and conflicted and skilled and talented, all depending on which aspects we're talking about. But Jupiter opposite Pluto is going to make his belief system very heavy, very destructive. But Jupiter being also the planet of success and achievement in life, the great benefic, Pluto is in Cancer, the sign of Jupiter's exaltation. So some of his success is going to come from Pluto, which means destructive, deep, dark, heavy, destructive quality that it also deals with sexuality, psychology, oppositions, control, domination. This is very very heavy material, right? And it's going to lead to some success for he has to bring that in, because that is where a lot of the Jupiter success lies. It's also his ascendant lord, right? So that's important for him. When he really went to that deep end, crossed that barrier into the real Plutonic territory, where he's just like, no holds barred. We're not gonna, and when he stopped censoring himself, when he just allowed himself to be fully himself, fully Lenny Bruce, fully funny and offensive, offensive to some, funny if you're not taking it. If you're taking it in the right way, it's funny. If you're not taking it in the right way, it's offensive. But that potentially destructive, but at the same time, groundbreaking, potentially destructive, but deep, it's Plutonic, really. That's where he gained a lot of success, right? That was his success. Yeah, and Saturn also is playing a part in it. Saturn is not really, Saturn has a nice trine to Pluto, so that's good. And what is Saturn trine Pluto? Pluto actually is benefiting the Saturn, because Pluto is the co-ruler of Scorpio, right? So Pluto is benefiting Saturn, Saturn is benefiting Jupiter, and Pluto is benefiting Jupiter. Saturn trine Pluto, that's just like, on a certain level, I guess he was okay with authority. There was a certain, let's see here, there's a certain resonance or harmony or skill between Pluto and Saturn. The destructiveness, and the Saturn is often authority. I don't know. Saturn is ruling the second and third house. Well, the third house cusp, largely the second house. So it does have to deal with his voice, his speaking. So there's harmony between the Saturn in the 11th and the Pluto. In any case, there's some harmony between that deep destructive quality and the speaking, and then the Jupiter, the self. So like being very speaking in a very destructive Plutonic way. Yeah, this very interesting trine sextile opposition here that does work in a very funny way. Amazingly. Let's see what else. Uranus is square ascendant, and that's very rebellious, right? It's perfectly square by the degree. And in some ways that's good. In some ways not good. It would be better if it was the trine, but maybe for Lenny Bruce and his material, the square is appropriate, because it makes it more tense and harsh and hard. However, the square is going to make him so rebellious that in a difficult way that it's contributing to a lot of his problems, right? Just being totally defiant, breaking the law, being really quite okay with being this or having even a need to be this really outspoken, rebellious, independent, shocking kind of person. Uranus is in the third quadrant, so it is talking about his expression, very shocking, creative expression, Pisces. You know, and it's more like the squares really make you work hard at it. So it's like it's like there's this drive in order to be shocking, shocking expression, right? I mean, I have it conjunct the ascendant, and it does tend to make me more accident prone because the ascendant is the body, the self. I can be quite shocking. I'm very independent, but I don't have. I mean, this is in a way, this is even more noticeable because of the expression, and you know, that he's a speaker, so it's coming out more. It's quite different. He did die young, so that square influencing the self, certainly, you know, and Sun ruling the 8th house. So yeah, it's still having a negative impact on the ascendant, I believe, but definitely contributes to his quite shocking. It's also square the descendant, which you have to take into account. His relationship to other people is always going to be that very provocative, very controversial, very rebellious quality. Yeah. His IC is in Aries, so that's ruled by Mars. Mars is in detriment, right? A lot of planets in poor dignity, which is why he was so like comfortable being the bad guy, being like, you know, the funny bad guy. I forgot to mention Uranus also is going to make him funny, humorous, because Uranus brings in the Aquarian vibe, and I didn't even touch on the South Node. But yeah, it's that the shocks. The shocks are funny. You know, if you really look at humor, it's the unexpected quality that makes people laugh. You know, laughter is a reaction. It's not we don't consciously laugh. Like conscious laughter is, it's fake, right? Laughter is when we're unconscious, when we're hitting the funny bone, the subconscious reaction. You know, when somebody catches us off guard and we're like, ha ha ha, you know, that was a fake one. But I mean, when it's real, it's like, you know, it's from within. It's not like we don't decide to laugh, right? That's the whole point of laughter. That's why we love it. We're not deciding to laugh. We're like, oh, you can't make me laugh. Oh my God, you made me laugh. Okay, you got me, right? That sort of thing. And that's Uranian. Uranus can, you know, operate in different ways. It's not always funny, but it can be very funny, especially in like Pisces, because Pisces is very creative. The square is going to be obnoxiously funny, right? The real humor is in this, you know, 1 degree Aquarius South Node in the 2nd house, right? His voice, his speech, Aquarius often has the funny bone. That really, I mean, because it's so absurd, it carries the Uranian vibe. But Uranus alone may or may not be funny. Aquarius may or may not be funny also, but a lot of times it is. It's just absurd. It's wacky. It's insane. It's hilarious, right? So that's the humor. 2nd and 3rd house, Uranus, Aquarius South Node. Steve Carell has the Aquarius South Node as well, right? Steve Carell is an amazing comparison to Lenny Bruce because Steve Carell has like so much dignity in all his planets. And you can see Steve Carell is like such a good boy. He's such a good boy. He plays like he did like his first movie was like 40-year-old virgin, or one of his first movies. And so he's like, that's the classic Steve. That's Steve Carell represents the opposite spectrum of hilarious. And he's hilarious. I love Steve Carell, but he's like such a good boy. And Lenny Bruce is such a bad boy. So that kind of gives you an idea of what planets in dignity versus planets in poor dignity are. Lenny Bruce, Eminem, right? These poor dignity planets. Yeah. So I see in Aries, Chiron is in the 4th. So his home life is not good. His early childhood, definitely not easy, difficult. Aries, Mars. So Mars is part of his early childhood. Mars in Libra, so poor dignity, Navy, armed forces, that is a part of it. Public, you know, all that. Father in the public, but not really part of home. You know, obviously missing 8th house. Yeah. So Mars conjunct the sun, it's by 10 degrees, but it's still very influential. That's going to make him very much a go-getter, even though it's important dignity in Libra. It's going to make him very initiative, like having a lot of action, not lazy, right? Even though Sun in Libra can potentially be lazy because it's that Venus element. Like if you have Sun conjunct Venus, like I do, there is a quality of indulgence that can make people happy but lazy, right? And I definitely noticed that. I have a good relationship with Mars, so that makes me physically active, but I do have my lazy side, like intellectually, like I don't like to read and write, you know, so I can have that indulgent quality. That's Venus. But you know, Mars definitely gets people, you know, it lights the fire underneath their butt. They get to work, they get to action, right? So Mars is ruling the 4th house, so he loves to talk about it, homeland. You got criticized in, I think, Australia for always talking about America. That would be the 4th house, you know. So stuff like that, but it's also politics. What else? Mars is ruling the 11th house, social issues, very important to him. So these are all this is why he's like talking about all different stuff, like sex and taboo, controversial stuff, religion, philosophy, social issues. 11th house are groups and networks, and also politics. I mean, if we bring in 4th and 11th, that's very much politics, right? So he's very widely versed. He wants and highly critical as well. Moon, Virgo, 9th house, high-mindedly critical, like critical of the very high, like high-level academic criticism. Like his criticisms are very well informed, being in the 9th house. They're going to be religious, philosophical, but also like bringing that high-level like academia, right? Especially with Virgo, right? Like he's no slouch. Like he can really be critical with this combination. You know, you can criticize, but ignorantly so, or you can criticize in a very intelligent, informed way. I think his criticisms were very intelligent and informed, especially, I'm just speaking really because of this position, that it would be a very high level criticism. Moon in Virgo, 9th house, there's nothing slouchy about that. It's going to be very critical, very well defined, very on point. All right. What else? I mean, Pluto in the 7th on its own is going to bring in a lot of control and domination with others, and manipulation. So like he's going to want to control his girlfriend. He's going to want, like, if there's hecklers in the audience, he's going to smack it down. He's just going to be like, no, because you cannot control Pluto. Pluto will control you. You can't control Pluto. You simply can't. Pluto is, if you try and control Pluto, you will bring out the destructiveness in Pluto. Pluto will self-destruct and will destruct you, right? That's the nature of Pluto, right? They have two functions. It's like, well, there's probably a lot more than two functions, but like power, control, manipulation, psychology, or self-destruction, and just total destruction. Burn it to the ground and then rebirth from there, right? So he probably was quite manipulative, quite controlling, powerfully so, and probably, you know, it's very difficult for him if he couldn't control his girlfriend or people in his life. And quite, I think this Saturn made him very authoritative in his ability to control people. So also for the audience, Saturn is authority, Pluto's that power and control. So, you know, and then Jupiter is the teacher, the guru. So even though it's not in good dignity, it's still Jupiter. So his ability to master the audience, to influence them, to be an authority, I mean, if you look at his performance, he really is a very masterful performer. He really just has control, and that is signified with this combination, because all three of these planets are very mature, big, powerful planets, right? I left Pallas in here in Gemini because it seems to play in quite well with this Mercury. If you look at the mythology, Pallas Athena, and Mercury or Hermes work well together. They team up to help Perseus defeat Medusa. So this shows that when Pallas and Mercury are together in a harmonious way, it enhances the mind. It enhances the intellect. I have them conjunct in the 7th house in Taurus, so that helps me a lot. Mine is quite interesting because it's actually right above Algol, which is Medusa, right at 25 degrees Taurus. So that's interesting. It's like the mythology playing out. But in any case, this I think is a very powerful trine here. And trines and sextiles, remember, are skills and talents. They can make people lazy and indulgent because they're so easy. You know, the person does not have to try for them. I don't think I talked about the grand kite here, the grand trine with the kite, but I will. But yeah, I mean, he's very talented. You can see by all these blue lines, and there was some conflicts, obviously. But this, you know, this would definitely help with his wittiness, his intellect, his ability to connect to the audience, and all that. Mercury is, you know, rules Gemini, so this is like very, very strong trine. So that's why I left it in there. I always check to see if there's anything interesting going on with the asteroids. Pallas is an asteroid, but it's still very prominent here. But you can see all these blue lines, all this harmony, 26, 25, 24, 14, 14, 13, 24, 24, 22, this grand fire trine. Grand fire trines are great for leaders and inspiration. They're just very inspiring people, and they can really rally people up and enliven people and inspire people. They're just blazing infernos of heat and light and inspiration. And there's this kite here, 24, Mercury, pulling in also in the sun, expression, communication, intellect, right? And then Neptune, showbiz, being on stage, glamour, glitz, creativity, ascendant, self. Chiron, the lower class, the underbelly, society's underwear, right? Tying into the Pallas as well, the strategy, the intellect. So this is very, I mean, very interesting. There's so much going on. North Node in Leo in the 8th house. 8th house is potentially criminal because it's other people's resources, shared money. So I mean, yeah, definitely he's not above breaking the law, but hidden things, secrets, Leo, fame, being on stage. So yeah, a lot. It's also trying to Venus, which is his MC Lord, 5th house Lord. Conflicts, we look at Mercury and Venus, because Venus is the 6th whole sign house, Mercury is the 6th quadrant. So Mercury, very public conflicts. If the 6th is going into the 10th, that's really, I mean, I have that, so I know that personally. Conflicts in the work area, conflicts with the public, getting in fights very publicly, right? And it's conjunct the debilitated Sun and the detriment Mars. So public conflicts all over the place, but as well as loss. Because if we take Venus, 12th house, 12th house indicates loss. So, but there's some good to come out of 6th Lord in the 12th house. It's disappearance of conflict as well. It can be lost in the conflict, but the conflict can be lost in itself. But Venus is square Moon, so definitely negatively influencing him through conflicts, and hurtful conflicts, that destroy his inner peace, right? So he's going to turn to drugs more. So definitely not a happy camper, very talented for sure, right? All these blue lines, Grand Trine. I mean, I keep thinking of Eminem, very similar. In any case, let's look at Draconic chart, and voila, just look at the blue lines. Just look at all these blue lines. The reason that is because 1 degree air sign, south node. Draconic will always be 0 degrees Libra. So the nodes are trine, and so all the planets are trine. So, I mean, talent galore with the natal and Draconic. If you have a south node that is 0 degrees, or north node 0 degrees or 1 degree fire, south node 0 or 1 degree air sign, there's going to be a fantastic harmony between natal and Draconic chart. So Chiron right on the ascendant. So I mean, and I like to think of the Draconic chart as somebody's true face underneath the mask. I mean, the natal chart really is the true face, but like the deeper hidden face, the spiritual face, almost, you could say. So Chiron, society's underwear, right on the ascendant. I mean, that's his identity. He identifies as the homeless, the prostitute, the wounded, the rejected, all that, the outcast, very much so. I mean, the weirdo, the doing things totally different. Okay. Let's see here. Pluto in Pisces in the 3rd cusp, very destructive expression and creative as well. Pisces. Neptune, Chiron, Moon. So Moon and Neptune obviously still together, but 4th house. So that's mother, right? Mother was a dancer, performer. 4th house is home, early childhood. And then look at all this Gemini in the 7th house, 6th, 7th. Mercury in domicile, right conjunct the descendant. Pretty much exactly 22. And that's perfect, right? For such a witty character, witty performer. Sun in Gemini, MC in Gemini, Mars in Gemini. Mars a little bit more in the 6th, but fighter, conflict, like a lot of conflict, a lot of, that the 6th house enemies, right? Mars in the 6th is a fighter, and in Gemini, verbal fighting, verbal conflict. Saturn conjunct Pluto. Again, Saturn, and this long-standing girlfriend that he had, right? But Saturn is in Cancer. It's in poor dignity, so definitely like long-standing poor undignified girlfriend. That makes sense. Conjunct Pluto, authority, power, mixing together. Very interesting. Venus and Leo in the 8th house. I mean, talking about, performance, talking about like sex and performance at the same time, mixing those energies. 8th house, Leo, Venus, right? Creativity, love, indulgence, all that, women, sexual women, sexualizing women, all that stuff. Ascendant in Leo, perfect, in the 8th house. Jupiter in Virgo, still Jupiter's in, it's trine, right? Everything's trine. And it's very prominent. It's in the 9th, well, 10th whole sign, but 9th quadrant, in poor dignity. But Jupiter in Virgo, again, very critical, right? And a very critical teacher, very critical Jupiter. But Jupiter's still good, you know, where if it's angular, and this is the 10th whole sign house, so that's good. Success, career success. And then Uranus and Scorpio, 11th house. Yeah, I mean, you know, Uranus, for him, it's very comedic. So comedic comic groups, the groups and networks that he's going to be around are going to be Uranian comedic. So in any case, what's really prominent is this Gemini stellium in the 7th, 6th, 7th. That makes a lot of sense. And Chiron on the ascendant, and Jupiter and Virgo in the 9th, 10th, Venus here as well, right? So, and all these trines, so amazing, really, really amazing. That's it for Lenny Bruce, guys. Hope you enjoyed this. This was by request, just throw that in there. And hope you enjoyed that. Please hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't already, leave a comment down below, and book reading with me. My website is macroastrology.com. My email is macrogoldmachine.com. And that's it for now. I will see you again soon. Thank you. Bye.